So we are now on the second part of our discussion on how are we going to log in into MySQL database. Okay, so we are done with the PHP side or the server or the script wherein it is going to communicate with our database. So we are now going, in this video, we are going to discuss the login page, okay, on the client, the Next JS. Then on how are we going to get data from the user for the username and the password, then pass it to the API and validate if the user credential inputted by the user is valid. Okay, so as we have ended with our first part 1 video, so we have here our the username, then the password, and the button for the login. And when the user is going to click on the login button, it is going to call a function named login. Okay, now don't be confused with our component with this page, because the name of this component, by the way, is login, but take note it is a capital N, and this function here is small letter n, L I mean. So we have here the function. Okay, and we have here our output. Okay, so we have here, so the user can now input the username and the password. When the user is going to click on the login button, it is going to redirect to the main page. Okay. So first that we are going to do is import the library that we are going to use to communicate with an external page. Okay, so we're going to import axios from axios. Okay, so again, this is our library or the object that we're going to use when we are going to communicate with our API. Okay, so we are now on the login routine. Okay, so the very first thing that we're going to do is we are going to define the URL where we are going to access the API endpoint. Okay, so as what we have before, so we have the local host, then we have, oh, I forgot. Oh no, it's contacts dash API slash, then we have users.php. Okay, so this is our URL. So next is we are going to define the data that we are going to send into our API. Okay, so as you can see, we have here our users API. Okay, so it is going to ask for the username and the password. Okay, but anyway, what we are going to send, we are going to send the parameters operation and JSON. Our operation should be login, so that it is going to call the login method, okay, or function. Then into our login function, it is going to expect for a JSON parameter which contains the username and the password. Okay, so this is what we had discussed in our previous video. So first, I'm going to define my JSON data. Take note, this is not yet the JSON object, okay, that or parameter that we are going to send later on into our API. Okay, so it is going to ask for the username. Okay, by the way, this username here, okay, by the way, I'm going to complete it first. Okay, username, this is the key. Okay, then we are going to have the value, and the value is we have this username here. Okay, then we have the username, and also it asks for the password. Okay, and we are going to supply for the value we have here the password. Okay, so I'm going to validate. Maybe some of you might get confused when we're going to have username, password, and password. Okay, first, this is an object with JavaScript. Okay, and we have here a key value pair. So we have here the key value, another key, then we have the value. So how are we going to determine, where are we going to determine this one here, username, password? Is it possible that I'm going to create here a uname? Okay, so in this example that we have, we cannot have a uname here. Why? It is because the API needs a username. So as you can see here, JSON, then username. Okay, username and password. Okay, so these are the parameters our API endpoint is expecting from the clients. Okay, so therefore, in our here, we must have to have a username. Okay, take note, username and password. And the values here, this username and the password here, are actually based on the name of our variable here. Okay, of our state variables, username and password. Okay, so don't be confused why we have here the same names. Okay, but anyway, okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change, okay, if ever I'm going to change that into uname, okay, so what I'm going to do, so I must have to change this one here into uname. Okay, but as of now, I have already set here in my API that I'm going to use the parameter username, so we're just going to stay with the username. Okay, so take note, this is still the JSON data, wherein later on we are going to assign it for the parameter JSON. Okay, so next is we are now going to use our axios, okay, so that we could send these values into our API. Okay, I'm just going to maximize it first. So we have var, okay, we have response. So we're going to define here a response object, okay, then that is going to hold the return value from the API. Okay, so what we are creating here actually is we are creating here a request, okay, into our API by using now axios. Okay, so we're going to use, by the way, the method axios.get. So first we're going to define, we have here our syntax. We have here URL, okay, then the configuration or the parameters that we are going to send into our API. So I have defined here my URL, okay, for my API. So I'm going to have the URL, then for our parameters. Okay, so what are our parameters? So we're going to issue here params, then define our parameters. Okay, so again, so that you will not be confused, so we have here parameters to send is operation and JSON. Okay, in which JSON contains our JSON data. So this is our JSON data. Okay. So first is we're going to have the JSON. Okay, so our JSON here is we are going to have the JSON data. So a bit there, our JSON data. But take note, JSON, since it is a parameter and we are going to send it into our API, so it is not expecting us for a string parameter or value. Okay, so as you can see, our JSON data is actually an array. Okay, so what we're going to do is to convert JSON data into an array. So with PHP, we have converted the array into a string by using the function JSON encode. Okay, so with JavaScript, we are going to use the object JSON, the method stringify. Okay, so it is going to convert this array here into a string. Okay, so therefore this is then going to be sent as a string. Okay, so that's the value for our JSON. So aside from our JSON, we're going to have our operation. Okay, and in our case, our operation here is we are going to have login. Okay, so we are done with our request and request by using now our axios. But take note here, if ever I'm going to have then let's say on line number 19, we are then going to validate. If I'm going to have console.log, then response, okay, it is going to return an empty or undefined response. Why? It is because axios.get is an asynchronous operation. So when you say asynchronous operation, it is going to take a while, okay, before this command here is going to finish. Okay, so what will happen is that once Next JS or React is going to execute this one here without specifying that this is an asynchronous operation, it is going to immediately execute the next command after it. Okay, so therefore, while Axios still waiting for the response from the API, we are now executing number 19, line number 19. So therefore, there will be no value for the response. It is going to report an undefined value. Okay? So we must have to inform React or Next.js that axios.get is an asynchronous operation. So therefore, we are going to tell React to await. Okay? It is going to await for axios to finish before it is going to work with the or execute the next line. Okay, by the way, I forgot to delete the async here. Okay, so as you can see, we have here an error. Await expressions are only allowed within asynchronous functions. Okay, so how are we going to specify that this function is expecting for an asynchronous operation or is an asynchronous function? Okay, because we are using here an await. Okay, and if ever we're going to use an await, it is going to we must have to make this function as asynchronous. So therefore here we are going to define it as async. So therefore this is now an asynchronous function. So therefore it is going to await, meaning it is going to wait or await for this command to finish before it is going to execute the next line. Okay, so through that way our response has now its value. Okay, so now I'm not going to include any error trapping of operations, okay, because I want to concentrate first on the logic on how are we going to use axios or how are we to communicate with the PHP. On the next videos, I'm going to have some error trapping so that we could optimize our code. Okay, so at this line here, we are now done with, or we have now the data from our API. And from our API, it is going to return a JSON value. Okay, as you can see here, if ever it is valid, okay, it is going to return at least one record. Actually, it is going to return one record. Okay, the user credentials. But if ever the username and password is not valid, it is going to return, as it is going to fetch, okay, it is going to return an empty array. Okay, so that's the value of our return value. So that is why we are going to validate here. Okay, I'm just going to have here check or validate if the user is valid. If valid, I'm just going to have it this way. Okay, so how are we going to validate if it is a valid user? As I've said, we are going to validate the response that data. Again, that data is the one that is, okay, axios response. You could see it there. It is going to return the return value. Okay, so this return value here will be contained inside the data property. Okay, so that's why we're going to validate if response that data that length, okay, is greater than 0, meaning it is valid. Oops, 0, meaning it is valid. Okay, else, so therefore it is not valid. So I'm just going to have here alert invalid username or password. Please try again. Okay. But if ever valid, so we are now going to send or redirect the user to our landing page or main page. Okay, but now I'm just going to have an alert. Okay, as of now, I'm just going to have welcome. Oops. Welcome to my page. Okay, I'm just going to have it this way. Okay, so that we could determine if ever our algorithm is correct. Okay, so save. Okay, so I'm going to try. Okay. By the way, just we're using here the DB contacts. Okay, we have here DB contacts. Then we have here our users. Okay, so we have here the valid users. So we are going to try any of these users. Let's say Pitok. Pitok username, then we have the password. Okay. Pitok, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then click login. So we have here, welcome to my page. So therefore, valid. Okay, so how about Pitoks? This must be invalid. So click on login. So we have here invalid username or password. Okay. So that's how are we going to validate for the user. Okay, just determine if ever the return value, since we're expecting for an array, if the length is greater than 0, then meaning it is valid. Okay, so next is we are going to send again. We are going to send the user to the main page. Okay, but anyway, I'm going to have that on the next video. Okay.